أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين أما بعد. Awaited Savior of Humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. My respected brothers and sisters, Zawar of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our third and final introductory video welcoming the Nasimco and Al-Faraj group on their impending ziyarat towards the A'imma salamullahi alayhim ajma'een of the holy sanctuaries in Iraq. And our themes over these last few videos has been to understand the concept of ma'rifah, deeper insight and cognizance of the ziyarat that we are hoping to achieve and are striving towards. And in the first video we tried to establish the concept of ma'rifah of the land of Karbala itself. And we spoke about how the land of Karbala, in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has an exponential value above and beyond that of the land of even Mecca, the place of the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We also spoke about how the Anbiya wal Mursaleen, the prophets and messengers, salamullahi alayhim ajma'een, even in a state of absolute rida, and in proximity to God in the sanctuaries of heaven itself, desire for the ziyarat of the martyrs of Karbala salamullahi alayhim ajma'een. And all of this shows to us the value of the land that we are going to assemble upon, inshaAllah. And then in the second video we spoke about the concept of ma'rifah, of deep insight towards the station and position of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein salawatullahu salamuhu alayh. And we spoke about his lofty character, how he was on the 10th of Muharram, for the purpose of having cognizance of what his personality was like. The first reason, of course, is so that you and I generally can mold ourselves in accordance with his personality. But the other reason is because the hefty reward that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places upon the scales and written upon the books of those who perform the ziyarat is based upon a condition according to the ahadith, which is a knowledge and an awareness of the rights of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, who he was, what he undertook, what he stood for. And as such, when I understand truly what took place on the 10th of Muharram, what his personality was like, what he hoped to achieve, then when you and I stand in front of him, inshallah, in just a few days' time, we will have the opportunity to truly have a glimpse of who this man was, and through that, the ziyarah becomes all the more fulfilling, and as such we fulfill the condition as laid upon us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are but a few days away, inshallah, from our ziyarah, and many of us only have 2 days or 3 days or 4 days before we actually stand in front of A'imma salamullahi alayhim ajma'een. And as such, it is now down to these last few hours, and our video in this segment is going to discuss these final few hours of preparation. In these last 48 and 72 hours, in this last few hours when we are journeying on the planes, when we are taking time at the airport, when we are on the coaches from one city to another, what is it that we can do? How is it that we need to prepare ourselves? And in terms of the ma'rifah of the ziyarah itself, how do we link these final few hours of preparation and the concept of deeper cognizance and awareness and insight of our ziyarah of the A'imma salamullahi alayhim ajma'een? We're going to discuss 3 facets and divide our discussion into 3, inshaAllah. The first is, what is it that we need to do in these final few hours to ensure our preparation for all of the A'imma salamullahi alayhim ajma'een that we're going to stand in front of. Number one. Number two, we want to ask ourselves, in terms of our preparation for the journey itself, what is it that you and I can be doing in these final few hours to prepare ourselves along route on our journey? And thirdly, what is it in particular that the recommendation from Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam was in terms of the final few hours of preparation before we travel towards Abu Abdullah alayhi salam? And we want to understand this in light of our concepts of the formalistic ziyarah and the ziyarah which is done by the heart, and understand it in light of what we want to ultimately achieve in these last few hours of preparation. Number one, in terms of our ziyarah, we are going to stand in front of several of the ma'asumeen salamullahi alayhim ajma'een, inshaAllah. Most of our preparation, most of our ahadith, most of our ahkam ends up being in light of the master of the martyrs, Abu Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam, and rightly so. However, that does not mean that we neglect or that we forget the other A'imma salamullahi alayhim ajma'een that we're going to stand in front of. We will stand in front of the commander of the faithful, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib. We will stand in front of our 7th and 9th Imams respectively, Imam Musa al-Kadhim and Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam. We will stand in front of our 10th and 11th Imams, Imam Ali al-Hadi and Imam Hassan al-Askari. And we will stand in front of the place in which our 12th Imam, Imam al-Mahdi, went into his period of ghaibah, salamullahi alayhim ajma'een. And as such, it is important that our preparation is weighted towards all of our Imams, and our concept of what we want to achieve is in light of all of the Imams and not just one of the Imams that we're going to stand in front of. And that means that all of us need to have prepared ourselves in light of at least the basics of the biography of all of the Imams, what they stood for, what their achievements were, what their struggles were, and at least a handful of the narrations that they have left for us in their lifetimes. So, in these final few hours, as we depart, as we're in transit, as we are in our hotel rooms, as we are on the buses from one city to another, one stop to another, it is important that we have taken with us some literature that we can acquaint and reacquaint ourselves in regards to the lives and the legacies of the A'imma salamullahi alayhim ajma'een. There are many small books that we would have in our libraries. There are many small articles available on the internet, many compilations of ahadith available on the various Shia websites that we can print off, and ultimately there should be no excuse as to why we have not acquainted ourselves with the lives and legacies and achievements of all the A'imma salamullahi alayhim ajma'een, so that before we stand in front of them, we have a glimpse as to who each and every one of them are. The last thing that we want is to stand in front of Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salam and let the speaker introduce the Imam to us. It should be that I have acquainted myself to Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam, Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam, Imam al-Askari alayhi salam, myself, so that when I stand in front of them, I know the Imam I have stood in front of. There are many recordings on YouTube from many of our ulama and khutaba and dhakireen towards the biographies and the lives of our Imams, and so we should ensure that we should do something in their ways. My humble advice is as such: for every one of the Imams that we hope to stand in front of, so that is Imam al-Husayn, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam al-Kadhim, Imam al-Jawad, Imam al-Hadi and Imam al-Askari, salamullahi alayhim ajma'een, for all of our Imams, we should ensure that for all 6 of them, we have memorized at least 3 narrations of them each. Maybe we can do more, maybe we can do 5, but we should try to memorize maybe just small one-line hadith, small narrations from them. We should memorize at least 3 narrations from them each, so that when we stand in front of them, we have cognizance of the advice that they have tangibly given to us in their lifetimes for you and I. Now here we go a step further. The narration from our 6th Imam, Ja'far as-Sadiq salawatullahu salamuhu alayhi, again we're talking in light of ma'rifah, cognizance, deeper understanding. Our Imam salamullahi alayhi is narrated to have said, Hadithun tadrihi khayrun min alfi hadithun tarwihi. That one narration that you have understood is better than 1,000 that you narrate. Meaning that if I have understood, had cognizance, have ma'rifah, deeper insight of one narration from Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam, it is better than 1,000 that I may narrate from Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam. And as such, when we narrate and we memorize and we record in our minds and hearts these 3 narrations from each and every one of our Imma salamullahi alayhim ajma'een, as we are traveling, as we are in transit, as we are on the bus to the Imams, as we are passing around the chevron, as we are talking and laughing and discussing and remembering and making new friends and making old friends on our journey, we should also sit back and take some time in order that we can recount these narrations in our heart and think about what they mean to you and I. And thus we can stand from tonight to make this, and this is something that we can do over these next 10, 12 days as we stand between ourselves and every one of the Imams salamullahi alayhim ajma'een. This is the first great thing that we can do in the final hours of our preparation. In the second regard of our preparation, there is a very important thing that I must emphasize with a lot of discussion for you, and each and every one in us must take this discussion away. Please, as you listen to this recording, make note of it, write it down, think about it, and make sure it is something that you and I implement. In terms of the ma'rifah of our ziyarah, there is no more important a question that you and I can pose other than this one question. What is it that I want to achieve from this ziyarah? Am I going because I wish to ask for my hajat in a holy place? Do I wish to tick the box and stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say I fulfilled my duty? Is it that I want to return back to my friends and family and tell them about the awe of the shrines that I visited? Am I here for tourism and to take as many photos for my Facebook and Twitter accounts as possible? What is it that I want to achieve? Now ultimately I can't answer that for you. I can only answer that for myself. In terms of the reformation of my character, the goals that I have in my life that I hope are achieved through the stepping stone that is the ziyarah to Holy Karbala and the sanctuaries of Iraq and the presence of the Imams salamullahi alayhim ajma'een. Now, in terms of the reformation of character, in terms of the things I want to achieve on behalf of my family and community, be it both locally and globally, the secret to achieving is not to implement those upon my return from Karbala. Rather, it is to implement them from before I commence my journey to the land of Karbala. Why? 2 primary reasons. Number 1, if I wait to implement the changes to myself, to my environment, to my home, to my room, to my family, to my community, after I return, this will be more difficult because the environment that I return back to will be the same that I left it in. And as such, that means very little has changed, and thus all the good work that I hope to achieve will be increasingly difficult, because the environment I return back to will be the same that I have left it. Nothing will have changed. And as is human nature, I will fall back into my environment that I left it in. If I want to change the atmosphere of my room, if I want to stop listening to music, if I want to take down certain posters, if I want to change the way in which I speak to my family members, the things I watch on TV, the things I download on internet, I shouldn't be doing those things upon my return. I should do those things before I leave, so that they are removed from my environment when I return back in a spiritually orientated mindset, when my heart has had seeds implanted in it and the journey has watered those seeds. I return back to my environment, which is already sanctified, purified of its evils, and as such I already start as I meant to go on, not the other way round. The second reason is, ultimately, none of us have a guarantee that we will even get to ziyarah or return from the ziyarah. And as such, what I don't want to do is stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this great pilgrimage. I don't want to stand in front of Hussein ibn Ali and Amir al-Mu'mineen and the place in which my master of my age, Imam al-Mahdi, ajjalallahu ta'ala faraj al-sharif, entered into ghaibah from. And at that point, carry with me the burden of my sins. I should already have purified of myself that sin, and then stand in front of A'imma salamullahi alayhim ajma'in. If you have not already pondered and had cognizance of what your achievements are for this journey and how your life wants to change and ascend to a higher pedestal of living through this journey, then tonight is the night in which you and I can make those changes, inshaAllah. My humble advice is, have a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 7 things that you wish to change in your life. Prioritize them, have a strategy for them, have your methodology of achievement, the timeline of achievement, and then begin to implement those things from before you go away, so that in these last 2 or 3 days of preparation, you have already achieved those things, so that by the time that you start to arrive into Holy Najaf on Saturday morning, inshaAllah, you will have already purified yourself, your environment, your family of those things. A very important caveat. When you want to make changes, it is often friends and family that you will look to help you achieve those changes. It may be that you don't want to go somewhere anymore. You may no longer want to speak to someone in a certain way. You may no longer want to partake in a certain action. But, however, it is your close friend circle or your family unit that partakes in those actions that you no longer want to partake in. That's not to say you're better than anyone else, but you recognize that sometimes certain actions take place in light of a certain group of people or in light of a certain location, whatever the case may be. From within yourself, it needs to be that you have the strength within your character, within your soul, if needs be, to go to those people that you normally partake in those actions that you no longer want to, and say to them, this is something I want to change from henceforth. When I return back from Karbala, I no longer want this in my life. Please aid me and assist me in that growth process, so that when I return, I am a stronger character, and you aid me in retaining that strength, but also help me to ascend further away from those things, so that my life is more virtuous and more befitting of a life of a lover and a za'ir, a visitor of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. This is the second. The third thing is I would like to read to you a series of recommendations from our sixth Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq salawatullahu salamuhu alayh in regard to the ziyarah of Karbala itself. There is a great narrator of hadith and companion of our sixth Imam by the name of Safwan. Safwan is one of the most noblest of companions that has ever lived. We're talking a giant of a faqih, jurist, a giant of a mufassir, commentator of the Quran, and literally hundreds of narrations that have reached us, if not thousands, are by virtue of this great companion by the name of Safwan, rahmatullahi alayh. Safwan approached Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam and said to him, I desire for the opportunity to go on ziyarah to Aba Abdullah al-Husayn salawatullahu salamuhu alayhi in Karbala. What guidance do you have for me? Now what a statement, because you and I can imagine that if I was sitting with the master today, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, and I were to ask him, Ya ibn Rasulullah, I, in 2 or 3 or 4 days' time, am going towards Karbala al-Muqaddisah. What guidance, what recommendations would you have for me? This answer, theoretically, would be the same as what you would get from Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, as from what you would get from Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. And as such, this advice needs to be taken very beautifully into the heart, very sincerely, as a point of appreciation as to how to commence our ziyarah, insha'Allah. Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam told Safwan the following. He said, the first thing that you should do is that you should seek permission from Aba Abdullah al-Husayn to go on ziyarah. Subhanallah. What a wonderful statement. You see, many of us, when we go on ziyarah, we just go. We book our tickets, we get our visas, we pack our bag, we get on the plane, we go, we come, we arrive, we come back. But when we enter into someone's house, before we even get to their house, we normally extend a request. We call, we send a text message, we go on WhatsApp, we drop them a message, we say, Imran, Fatima, Ali, Zainab, I'm around, I'm coming, is it okay to pop by? Are you home at this time? And normally there's an etiquette. In the same way, before you and I go on ziyarah, we are obliged to ask each and every one of the Imams, salamullahi alayhim ajma'een, Ya ibn Rasulillah, do you allow me to come visit you? Do you invite me? I'm not worthy, but please, invite me so that I may be blessed by standing in your presence. Number one, ask the Imam for the permission to visit the grave of the Imam. Then, you should fast for a few days before your journey, ideally for 3 days, but the minimum is 1 day, so that you can prepare yourself spiritually. Remember, the purpose of the fast is to deny even that which is halal, to purify the stomach, to discipline the mind, so that for a few hours I have ensured consciously I'm in a state of servitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fast for 3 days. Then, this is the hadith from Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, he continues, then, on the day in which you intend to leave, gather your family underneath your house and make a dua and say, Oh Allah, I am departing for the ziyarah of Husayn ibn Ali alayhi salam. I entrust my family to you, to look after them, to keep them safe, to uphold their rizq, and ensure that I return back to them safely. You should perform ghusl, ideally in the river Furat. Now that today probably isn't possible because the river Furat is not clean, but many of us take a small bottle and get some water of Furat, and as we are performing our ghusl in the hotel room, we can just add it, and this will get the blessings of the river Furat that was stood in by Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. Then you should turn yourself towards Al-Ha'ir. This is the dome, this is the actual place, the marqad of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, the resting place underneath the dome of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. And you should walk with tranquility and solemnity towards Abu Abdullah. Take small steps, the Imam says. Why? Because every step that you take is rewarded with the equivalent of one Hajj and one Umrah. As you approach Abu Abdullah, recite dhikr, any dhikr you want. Takbir, tahleel, salawat, any dhikr that you want. Then as you stand at the door of Hussein ibn Ali, you should recite the following ziyarah. And this is where Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam ziyarat al-waritha. Assalamu alayka ya waritha Adam as-Safwatillah. Assalamu alayka ya waritha Nuh al-Nabiyillah was taught to Safwan by the 6th Imam Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Here we see that there is a preparation that needs to take place from the house until you even enter into the actual grave area, the actual dharih room of Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam. I would like to give my humble advice at this point and remind us that the ziyarah consists of two things. Look at what Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, that you have the ziyarat al-waritha, but you also have the feeling from within of the tranquility and the solemnity of Hussein ibn Ali's presence. This divides a ziyarah tangibly into two. The first is the formal ziyarah, and the second is the informal ziyarah. The formal ziyarah is the ziyarah that is dictated by the book, meaning it is the formalization that you should do this and you should do that and you should say this and you should say that. The informal ziyarah is more important than the formal ziyarah. The informal ziyarah is achieved through the heart. It is to visit Hussein ibn Ali, not physically, but spiritually. It is to annihilate oneself in his presence. It is to remove the idea that anyone else stands here and all I see is Hussein ibn Ali. It is to remove the physical structure of the haram itself and to arrive at the plains of Karbala, as was on the 10th of Muharram 61 after Hijrah. It is to remove the actual structure of the dhari, the structure of the grave itself, and to go into the grave and make your heart meet with the heart of Hussein ibn Ali, who is in the lofty stations of proximity and rida, pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the rida that you and I are hoping to achieve from the ziyarah of Hussein ibn Ali and all the a'imma salamullahi alayhim ajma'een. As you are in your quiet moments, as you pack, as you drive towards the airport, as you sit in the lounge, as you board the plane, as you are on the bus, just take a few moments as often and as regular as possible to do two things. One, the first thing you should do is think about what presents you want to meet Hussein ibn Ali with. You have heard his maqtal. You have heard what he was like on the 10th of Muharram. You have heard what happened to Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam, Sayyida Kulthum alayhi salam, and Bibi Sakina alayhi salam. You have heard what happened to Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam. When I stand in front of Hussein ibn Ali, what is the first thing I want my heart to convey to Hussein ibn Ali? It should be condolences to you, Ya ibn Rasulullah, for what happened to your mother, for what happened to your father, what happened to your grandfather, what happened to your brother, what happened to your sisters, and what happened to you on the 10th of Muharram. How do I want to present myself in front of him? And the second thing is you should begin to converse with him. Talk to him. Thank him for having invited you. Tell him about the priorities in your life. Tell him about the things that you hope to achieve in Akhirah. Tell him about your community. Tell him about the needs of humanity. Tell him about that which is within the burdens of humanity. And tell him that you have come to him for a purpose. Help you to achieve that purpose that you have in these last few days and in the 10 days that we have in the land of Karbala, inshaAllah. Walhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi al-Tahirin. Please raise your hands. Let us join each other in dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of the awaited Saviour, to allow us to be alongside Him at all times in our life and in our death, and that if we are to pass away from this world before His coming, to raise us from our graves, so that we may partake in the victory of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. We ask you, Ya Allah, there are many people around the world going through such desperate times, those people in the state of oppression and war, homelessness and poverty, lack of medicine, lack of education. Ya Allah, grant them all safety, security and victory for the sake of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. We ask you, Ya Allah, for the opportunity to perform the ziyarah of Aba Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam this year and every year of our life, inshaAllah. We ask you, Ya Allah, in the final moments of our life, we die in the love of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Wassalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the safety of all of our zawar around the world, and I look forward, inshaAllah, to meeting you all in the holy city of Najaf, serving you all, inshaAllah, and looking forward to building long-lasting and lifelong relationships, friendships with you all, inshaAllah. And we look forward to standing and basking in the glory of the sanctuary and presence of our masters, salamullahi alayhim ajma'een.